How Amish store food for 20 years without refrigeration in 2026. My name is Jacob Amish, and I farm in Holmes County, Ohio, the same land my grandfather farmed and his father before him. This past November, when a winter storm knocked out power across our county for 11 days, my neighbors were calling relatives in other towns, asking where they could store their meat before it spoiled. My wife Ruth and I barely noticed the outage. The ham hanging in our smokehouse had been there since October. The jars of venison on the cellar shelf had been sitting there since last deer season. Not a single thing in our house went to waste. I want to share with you today exactly how we do it. Not as a survival trick, not as something exotic. This is just how food is kept in a household that has never owned a refrigerator. According to the USDA's own food safety research, properly preserved foods using salt, smoke, and fermentation can remain safe and nutritious for anywhere between 2 and 25 years, depending on the method. These are not folktales. This is chemistry that has been confirmed by modern science, practiced by my people for over 200 years. Let me walk you through each method, the way I learned it, and the way it still works today in 2026. The first method is salt curing, and it is the oldest thing I know. Before there were freezers, before there were even ice houses in most of this county, there was salt. The Roman Empire paid its soldiers in salt. The English word salary comes from the Latin salarium, meaning salt money. Salt was once so valuable that wars were fought over it. My grandfather would say salt is the only currency that never lost its value because you can eat it. The science is simple. Bacteria need moisture inside meat to survive and multiply. Salt pulls that moisture out through a process called osmosis. Without moisture, bacteria starve. The meat keeps. For a dry salt cure, the ratio is 2.5% salt by the weight of the meat. That means for every pound of pork belly, about 11 grams of salt. Roughly 2 level teaspoons. A 5-pound shoulder takes 3 to 4 tablespoons. My wife Ruth rubs that salt into every fold and every surface of the meat, then sets it in our root cellar where the temperature holds between 36 and 40 degrees Fahrenheit year-round. A small cut like bacon is ready in a week. A whole ham needs 6 to 8 weeks, sometimes longer. There is one thing I want to be very plain about because the internet is often vague here, and being vague about this can make someone sick. For any long cure, anything that hangs and dries for more than a few weeks, you need what is called curing salt, sometimes sold as Prague Powder No. 1 or Tender Quick. It is regular salt mixed with a very small amount of sodium nitrite, about 0.25% of the meat's weight. That nitrite is what stops the bacterium that causes botulism. Plain salt is enough for quick jerky. For a hanging ham, use curing salt. The old Amish butchers knew this through hard experience. The modern food science simply gave it a name. The second method is smoking, and it builds on the first. Walk behind any traditional Amish farm in Holmes County or Lancaster County, and you will find a smokehouse. Ours is a small cedar building about 8 by 10 feet, with a low fire pit dug into the dirt floor and iron hooks running across the ceiling rafters. That smokehouse has been standing since my grandfather built it in 1959. It has not changed because it does not need to change. Smoke works 3 ways at once. It dries the meat further, removing what little moisture the salt left behind. It deposits natural antimicrobial compounds, phenols, aldehydes, organic acids, onto the surface of the meat, creating a barrier that bacteria cannot penetrate. And it gives the meat a depth of flavor that no oven on earth can reproduce. There are 2 kinds of smoking. Cold smoking runs below 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Just smoke and very little heat. This is how a true country ham is made, the kind that can hang in a cool, dry place for a year or longer without spoiling. Hot smoking runs between 160 and 225 degrees and cooks the meat as it smokes, the way barbecue ribs are done. Cold smoking requires proper salt cure first. Hot smoking cooks as it goes. The wood matters more than most people realize. We use hickory because it gives a deep, rich smoke that penetrates the meat evenly. Applewood is milder and sweeter, good for poultry and pork loin. Maple and oak both work well. Never use pine, cedar, or any soft, sappy wood. The resins in those woods will leave a bitter, toxic coating on the meat and can cause illness. A study published in the journal Meat Science found that properly cold-smoked and salt-cured pork can remain microbiologically safe for up to 12 months at cellar temperatures without any refrigeration. My grandfather's hams routinely lasted 14 to 16 months in our smokehouse. The science confirms what the practice always showed. The third method is fat sealing, which most people have never heard of. The French call it confit. On an Amish farm, we call it potted meat. The idea is this. You cook a piece of meat slowly, pork shoulder, duck legs, goose, sausage, until it is fully done. Then you submerge it completely in melted rendered lard and let the fat cool and harden around it in a crock or a glass jar. The hardened lard creates an airtight seal. No air means no oxygen. No oxygen means bacteria cannot survive. The meat sits undisturbed in that jar in our cellar for months, perfectly preserved. When Ruth wants to use it, she scoops the piece out of the lard, warms it gently in a cast iron pan, and serves it. The meat that comes out is tender and rich in a way that no frozen cut ever is. The fat itself gets saved and used for cooking. Nothing in our house is ever wasted. This method is documented in Amish and Mennonite household records going back to the early 1800s in Pennsylvania. A properly fat-sealed pork shoulder stored in a cool cellar has been tested and found safe and palatable at the 6-month mark. Some traditional European farms using the same confit method have recorded safe storage times of up to 9 months. The fourth method is fermentation, and it is the one that surprises people most. Fermentation is not a trend. It is not something people in yoga pants invented to sell at a farmer's market. It is a process that humans have been using for at least 9,000 years. Archaeologists have found fermented food residue in clay vessels dating to 7000 BC in what is now China. The Amish did not invent fermentation. We simply never stopped using it. The principle is this: certain beneficial bacteria, Lactobacillus and its relatives, feed on the natural sugars in vegetables and produce lactic acid as a byproduct. That acid makes the environment so hostile to harmful bacteria that they cannot survive. The food preserves itself through the work of the good bacteria. In our kitchen, Ruth ferments sauerkraut every October from the heads of cabbage we grow on 2 acres of our back field. She shreds the cabbage, weighs it, and adds 2% salt by weight, about 1 teaspoon of salt per pound of cabbage. She packs it tightly into a ceramic crock, weights it down so the cabbage stays submerged in its own brine, and covers it with a cloth. In 3 to 4 weeks, it is ready. In a cool cellar, that sauerkraut will stay good for 6 months, sometimes longer than a year. A 2019 study from the University of California, Davis, found that lacto-fermented vegetables stored at cellar temperatures between 55 and 60 degrees Fahrenheit maintained safe, stable pH levels for up to 14 months. The probiotics in properly fermented food are also significantly more concentrated than those sold in commercial supplement bottles. Ruth says the store-bought probiotic capsules are a very expensive way to get something you could make in a crock for almost nothing. The fifth method is the root cellar, and it is the home of every other method. Our root cellar is built into the north-facing hillside behind the barn. The walls are fieldstone, the floor is packed earth, and the ceiling is low. The temperature inside holds between 32 and 40 degrees Fahrenheit every month of the year, summer and winter, with no machinery, no electricity, and no bill from anyone. The earth itself maintains it. Root cellars work because the ground at a depth of 4 to 6 feet acts as a thermal buffer. It absorbs heat in summer and releases it in winter, keeping the temperature inside almost perfectly stable. The USDA's National Center for Home Food Preservation has documented root cellar temperatures in traditional farm structures, maintaining consistent storage conditions across all 4 seasons in cold climates like ours in Ohio. Inside our cellar right now, as I speak to you, there are bins of potatoes that have been there since September. There are bushels of apples that we picked in October, still firm and sweet. There are hanging cured hams, crocks of fat-sealed pork, shelves of pressure-canned beef, and barrels of brine vegetables. That cellar is the reason my family can eat well for 12 months from roughly 6 months of active farming and food preservation work. The sixth method is drying, which most people know as jerky. Long before electric dehydrators, there was the sun and the wood stove. We cut lean venison into thin strips, season them with salt and black pepper, and dry them slowly in our wood-fired oven at a low heat. The goal is to remove enough moisture that mold and bacteria cannot find purchase in the meat. The safety standard from the USDA is clear on this. The meat must reach an internal temperature of 160 degrees Fahrenheit at some point in the drying process to kill any bacteria present in the raw meat. After that initial heat, you can finish drying at 140 degrees until the meat is leathery and dry. Start hot, finish dry. That is the rule we follow. Properly dried venison stored in a sealed glass jar in a cool place will last 6 to 12 months easily. Vacuum sealed and kept in a cellar, the USDA has documented safe storage times of 1 to 2 years. NASA drew on these same traditional drying methods when designing the first space food rations in the 1960s, because dried meat is the most calorie-dense, lightest weight, longest-keeping food that exists. My grandfather dried venison strips every November for as long as anyone in our family can remember. He kept them in glass jars on the cellar shelf and ate them through April. He lived to be 91 years old and was never once made sick by his own food. The seventh and final method I want to share is pressure canning. I will be honest with you, pressure canning is the most modern of the methods I use. It came into common farm use in the early 1900s, which in the context of Amish food preservation is practically yesterday. But my grandmother canned beef and chicken in glass jars for as long as I can remember, and the method is reliable enough that I trust it completely. The process is this. You cook the meat, pack it hot into clean glass jars, and seal the jars in a pressure canner, not a boiling water bath, a pressure canner, under steam pressure for the time the recipe specifies. The high pressure raises the temperature inside the jars to 240 degrees Fahrenheit, which is hot enough to kill every bacterium and every spore, including the spores responsible for botulism. The USDA Complete Guide to Home Canning gives specific tested times and pressures for every type of meat. For beef chunks in a quart jar, it is 90 minutes at 10 pounds of pressure at sea level, adjusted for altitude. Do not guess. Do not shorten the time. Follow the tested recipe exactly. A properly pressure-canned jar of beef will keep on a cool pantry shelf for 3 to 5 years with no loss of safety or nutrition. Ruth opens a jar, warms the meat in a skillet with onions and broth, and we have a hot dinner in 15 minutes from beef we put up 3 winters ago. No power required, no thawing, no planning ahead. Here is what I want you to understand, sitting wherever you are reading this in 2026. These methods are not primitive. They are not a compromise you make because you cannot afford a modern appliance. A properly smoked ham is a better ham than anything you will pull out of a grocery store freezer. Lacto-fermented sauerkraut has more living nutrition in a single spoonful than a bottle of commercial probiotics. Fat-sealed pork shoulder cooked slow and warmed in its own lard is the kind of food that makes people ask what restaurant you ordered it from. The grocery industry has no financial interest in teaching you this. There is no profit in a family that buys one side of pork in November and eats off of it for 12 months. So the knowledge has quietly faded from most households over the past 70 years. But it has not faded from ours. If you want to start simple. Make a small batch of jerky this week. Buy 2 pounds of lean beef, cut it in thin strips, salt it well, and dry it in your oven with the door cracked at the lowest setting it will go, aiming for 160 degrees in the first hour. Once you have eaten meat you preserved with your own hands, nothing else about this will feel strange. You will only wonder why you waited so long to learn it. Tell me in the comments which method you want to try first. I read every one.